The story starts with Kelvin, who woke up in a magical world. Suddenly a window appeared that welcomed him to the other world. Then he learned that he don't have any memories of his old life. Kelvin was shocked at this, and wondered what his previous self had thought making this decision. Suddenly the menu window showed him his stats, and he realized that he is overpowered. Kelvin was happy to be a summoner and his adventure started. After that, he was on his way to the first town, and learned that he asked Goddess Melfina to become his servant. In addition, he learned that summoners are able to communicate with their servants. On the way to the first town, he learned that he was run over by Truck-kun, and it was a god's mistake. This god asked Melfina for help so that Kelvin would be reincarnated. Then Melfina said that Kelvin fell in love with her and that's why she agreed to become his servant. Kelvin also learned that he traded his old memories for more skill points. Afterwards, Melfina said that he claimed that he would fall in love with her even without memories of his old life. That's caught him off guard and Kelvin blushed. Kelvin wanted to see Melfina and he asked if he could summon her, but he was told that he didn't have enough MP for it and he needed to go leveling for this. Next, Kelvin arrived at the Adventurer Guild and the receptionists were very busy. After his turn, Kelvin told Angie that he would like to register as an adventurer. Following this, he was told to fill out a form, but Melfina stopped him. She gave him the advice to pretend to be a green mage to avoid problems. Afterwards, he received his guild ID and Angie explained to him the rules. He learned that completing 10 jobs would allow him to rise in rank, but if he achieved the C rank, he would have to take an exam. Then Kelvin planned to take on his first job, and Melfina suggested him to go after the blue slimes. Before Kelvin started his job, he bought a wooden rod. Then he went into the forest and he looked for blue slimes. Suddenly he spotted a group of blue slimes and Melfina told him to use his appraising eye. He learned that with this skill, he can appraise creators up to 100 levels above him. At that moment, Kelvin realized that Melfina's level was above 100. Then Kelvin planned to create a familiar contract with a blue slime and he was excited. He learned that he must first weaken the monster in order to make them to his familiar. Kelvin planned to hit them with physical attacks to avoid killing them. Suddenly he tried to hit the group of slimes with his wooden stab, but his attempt failed. He was surprised because he thought a slime would be easy to defeat. After this, he started to attack the blue slime again, but Kelvin was beaten up. Kelvin didn't plan to give up and he thought about a plan to weaken it. At this moment he came up with a good idea and managed to hit the blue slime. After this, he looked at the slime and the monster lost 2 life points. Melfina told him to create a familiar contract with the slime. Following this, he learned that creating a contract consumes half of his remaining MP whether he succeeds or not. A few moments later, he had successfully tamed a blue slime. He thought of a name for his slime and named him Clotho. Kelvin was excited, and he immediately summoned his new friend Clotho. Then he learned that Clotho wanted to hunt slimes with him. In the evening, he discussed a strategy with Clotho to defeat some slimes. Following this, they started, and Kelvin immediately defeated a slime with a wind spell. Meanwhile, Clotho took care of the second slime. After that, Kelvin learned he got a skill that boosts his family's stats by 100. He was surprised about his skill that turns familiars into powerful S-rank monsters. Kelvin returned to the town and he got his pay for his first job in this world. Then he planned to find the inn that Angie recommended to him. Along the way, he discovered that he can buy slaves in this world. The owner of the business introduced his customers to a half-elf. Kelvin was interested in the elf girl, but he decided to leave this place. A moment later, he arrived at the inn Spirit Song, and he met Claire. He planned to rent a room at this place, and Claire told him that she would start cooking dinner. After that, he went to his room, and he learned that there is no bath. He was sad and decided that one day he would live in a house with a bathroom. Afterwards, his stomach growled, and Claire prepared a feast for him. In the days that followed, Kelvin fought against many strong monsters, and Clotho always supported him. He leveled up quickly and became a D-rank adventurer within a very short time. Then another week passed, and Angie congratulated him for being promoted to an E-rank adventurer. Angie said she was worried at first when Kelvin started taking higher-ranking jobs. The reason for this was that ordinary adventurers couldn't do these jobs without a party. Angie suspected that Kelvin was a court mage, but Kelvin tried to avoid this question. After that, Angie gave him advice to buy new gear and told him to take care of himself. Following this, he planned to take a D-rank job, and Cashel told him about the Black Ghost Knight job. Cashel was a D-rank adventurer who was actually as strong as a B-rank. He was known to crush newbies, and the other adventurers were afraid of him. Then Kelvin was offered to join Cashel's party at the Black Ghost Knight job, but Angie was against it. Kelvin tried to refuse and he looked at Cashel's status. He got the title of murderer, and Kelvin understood that Cashel was not going back down. As a result, Kelvin suggested making it a competition to see who could defeat this Black Ghost Knight first. Cashel agreed, and he looked forward to crush Kelvin. Then Kelvin suspected that Cashel would try to murder him, but Kelvin planned to lure Cashel and his party into a trap. Meanwhile, Cashel asked his friend about his thoughts, and Gimel suspected that Kelvin got a C-rank concealment skill. Despite this, they were confident that they would defeat Kelvin. In the evening, Cashel's party arrived at the Wicked Spirit's castle, and the undead monsters were defeated. Suddenly Kelvin showed up, and they thought that Kelvin is a weak green mage. Kelvin said he waited for them because he knew they planned to kill him. Cashel thought that Kelvin knew about their plan because he found out about his comrades' bounties. Kelvin was surprised by it, and he looked down on his enemies. Reiji was furious, and he started running towards Kelvin to punch him. Kelvin cast a spell, and he turned the ground beneath his enemy into a muddy swamp. Meanwhile, Cashel was shocked and realized that Kelvin is not a weak green mage. Suddenly, Kelvin cast a wind spell and he launched a dangerous attack. Gimel was terribly afraid, and he decided to run away. Afterwards, Cashel planned to launch a counterattack, and Kelvin summoned Clotho to stop Gimel. At this moment, Clotho appeared in front of Gimel, and he had evolved to a slime Glitonia. Then we see a few days before, and Clotho was acting strange. Melfina explained to him that Clotho evolved into a Demon King class monster. Back in the present, one of the enemies was knocked out by Clotho. Meanwhile, Reiji managed to free himself, but Clotho took care of him. Cashel tried to take Kelvin down, but he played in a different league. A few seconds later, he knocked his enemies out, and he planned to hand them to the guild later. Kelvin then entered the room where the Black Ghost Knight was. He learned that Gerard is a strong monster, and Kelvin was excited. Kelvin said that he intended to defeat him, but he decided to make him his familiar. A few moments later, Kelvin got a new friend. Gerard told Kelvin that he was a knight captain and somehow became a monster because he had unfinished business in this world. Afterwards, Gerard gave him funny tasting candy, and he learned that Gerard was pranking him. He laughed, and Melfina reminded Kelvin that he wanted to make a contract. Gerard told Kelvin that he needs him to prove his strength because he only serves a strong master. Following this, Gerard was challenged to a fight. He began a combination attack with Clotho, but Gerard blocked it. Suddenly Kelvin cast an earth spell, but Gerard destroyed the earth wall with one stroke of his blade. Then Clotho attacked, and Kelvin supported him with air pressure magic. At that moment, Gerard remembered his past. One day an elf appeared and ordered King Alcarl to serve his kingdom. King Alcarl rejected his demands, but the elf punished them. As a result, everyone in this kingdom died of coronavirus. Back in the present, he remembered his goal of avenging his beloved kingdom. He received a power-up, and Kelvin was surprised about it. They went all out, causing Kelvin to play his trump card. The following morning, Kelvin returned to the guild, and he brought a fragment of the Black Ghost Knight. The adventurers congratulated him and thanked him for getting rid of Cashel and his gang. Afterwards, Angie wanted to talk to him, and he learned that he will be given a rank increase. Later on, Gerard asked Kelvin if Angie would be a candidate for his harem, and Melfina became jealous. Kelvin told them that they shouldn't talk nonsense. Following this, he met the guildmaster who greeted him. Leo introduced himself and asked Kelvin if he was from another world. That's when he realized that his concealment wasn't working because Leo's appraising eye got a higher rank. He also heard that Kelvin had defeated the Black Ghost Knight and asked if he was a summoner. Kelvin panicked, but his servants advised him to find allies. As a result, Kelvin decided to reveal his identity, and he wanted to know why Leo hadn't arrested Cashel. Leo replied that Cashel is a foreign noble, and without evidence it's hard to do much. Then Leo explained that he was not his enemy, and that he had already met someone from another world. Kelvin learned about the heroes of the Holy Empire of Doremus, and Melfina remembered them. After that, Leo told that the Priestess of Dreams heard the prophecy of God. The prophecy was about the revival of the Demon King. This caused the monsters to become stronger recently, and Leo said that the heroes couldn't protect the entire continent. For this reason, he asked Kelvin to support him in the fight against the monsters. He also asked why Kelvin kept his true identity as an otherworlder hidden. Leo already knew the reasons and offered Kelvin a deal. Kelvin accepted his deal and was promoted to a rank B adventurer. In the afternoon, Claire congratulated him and she was proud of him. Then she said that she will make an extra side dish in celebration of his promotion. Later, he went to his room and he asked Melfina about the heroes. Melfina told him that she had reincarnated some smart-looking high school students a few years ago. After this, she said he doesn't have to worry because he is the only one with overpowered cheat skills. Soon after, Kelvin was excited, and he wanted to learn more of this world. He summoned Clotho and asked him to give him his money. Before he went shopping, he asked Claire to set out another plate for tonight's dinner. Gerard asked him why he looked so excited, and he replied that he is going to buy a new party member. He explained that he needs a comrade who would help him fight strong enemies in case he encountered strong opponents like Gerard. Afterwards, he went to the place where the slaves are sold, and a man was set on fire. The customer wanted to buy the elf girl, but she was cursed. The business owner told Kelvin about the elf girl's problem. After that, Kelvin looked at her status and he wanted to buy the girl. Suddenly, the elf girl looked sad because Kelvin was leaving the place. A few hours later, Kelvin returned to the place and he wanted to buy the elf girl. The business owner warned him and tried to talk Kelvin out of it, but Kelvin gave the man a lot of money. As a result, Kelvin became the elf girl's new master. She was happy that Kelvin became her master, and he was told that her name was Ephiel. Then Kelvin learned that she had been a slave her entire life. She didn't want to hurt her new master and warned Kelvin about her curse. Kelvin wasn't scared and told her that she needs to calm down. After that, he started to remove the curse, and Ephiel was surprised by this. Also, he opened the handcuffs and told her that she would be his new party member. Ephiel was grateful and cried tears of joy because she was freed from her curse. When they arrived at the inn, Claire was surprised to see a girl with him. Claire wanted to give her new clothes. Following this, she took Ephiel with her and planned to take care of her. A few hours later, Kelvin was starving. Then Ephiel appeared, and she was wearing a cute maid outfit. Kelvin blushed, and he told her that she looks beautiful. Ephiel was happy with his words and said that she will do his best. Afterwards, they had dinner, and Kelvin was happy that Ephiel was enjoying her new life. He also introduced his comrades to Ephiel and told her about his secrets. Later, Kelvin got a problem because he couldn't get a room with 2 beds. He couldn't sleep and he was nervous because a cute girl was sleeping next to him. A month passed since he had Ephiel join his party, and they spent it leveling up and doing jobs. Also, we learned that she used all her points on archery and far-seeing. As a result, she became a powerful archer that assisted Kelvin in the fight. After their job, Kelvin's party returned to the guild. Kelvin learned that after another job, he can take the rank-up exam. Following this, Angie said that Ephiel is overpowered too, and they remembered Ephiel's rank C exam. After the story, Angie told Ephiel about a new sweets place. Ephiel wanted to visit the new sweets shop with her, and she wanted Kelvin to come with her. So Kelvin decided to accompany the girls to the new sweets shop in Parth. The next day, he realized he had a date, and was glad that Melfina was giving a divine oracle. After that, Angie showed up, and he told her that her outfit looked cute. Following this, Ephiel showed up, and Kelvin blushed by seeing her. He told her that she looked great and she was happy about his compliment. Later, Ephiel planned to let Kelvin try her cake. Meanwhile, some adventurers were jealous of Kelvin because he went on a date with 2 cuties. Suddenly, Angie wanted to feed him too, and he was embarrassed to stand out. Shortly afterwards, Tabra the Prince of Trycen appeared. He caused trouble and looked down on Kelvin. Then he said that he wanted to have his girls, and he wanted to do naughty things with them. Kelvin was angry, and he beat up Tabra's bodyguards. Tabra was shocked and terrified of Kelvin. Suddenly he couldn't move, and Kelvin learned that he planned to visit Leo's guild in Parth. Tabra had heard that a powerful adventurer is living in Parth, and planned to investigate the rumors himself. The reason for this was that he wanted to make the powerful adventurer his servant. Suddenly Tabra asked Kelvin to become his servant, but he refused. Then we see the Holy Empire of Daramis, and a priestess prays to goddess Melfina. Melfina learned that the heroes are growing splendidly. Suddenly she told the priestess to send the heroes to Parth. A few moments later the heroes appeared, and they learned that the goddess gave them a new oracle. Meanwhile, Ephiel couldn't sleep, and asked if Kelvin is awake. She thanked Kelvin for saving her today. Suddenly Kelvin apologized for not getting a room with 2 beds, and Ephiel misunderstood something. She thought that Kelvin didn't find her attractive and started crying. Then she confessed her love to her beloved master, and Kelvin wanted to kiss her. Suddenly he stopped and told her that she is the prettiest girl in the world. In the followed morning, Kelvin looked at the hero's stats. Then a little Clotho jumped on Ephiel so that she could take part in the servant network. Ephiel was surprised that the heroes' levels aren't really that high. For this reason, Kelvin was supposed to take care of the heroes, and he had already thought of a plan. Melfina was happy that Kelvin wanted to help them, and was sure that she would learn a lot by Kelvin's party. Then Claire showed up, and told Kelvin that the guild was calling him. Leo told him about a demon that was witnessed in a rank D dungeon. Afterwards, Leo mentioned that he learned about Kelvin's fight against Tabra. As a result, Kelvin had no choice but to accept the job. In the evening, he arrived at the D-rank dungeon and Erd greeted them. Erd explained to them that they had created a barrier around the hut. Following this, Kelvin's party went into the hut, and a secret entrance led to the dungeon. Before entering the dungeon, Kelvin told his comrades that they must always be on guard. Meanwhile, a demon sensed that adventurers entered the dungeon. A few moments later, they discovered a gate to the boss chamber. Kelvin opened the door and was surprised to see a girl in the room. Then he looked closer and noticed that the girl is a demon. Suddenly Archdemon Victor showed up and he was pleased to meet the intruders. Kelvin was surprised because he was aware that a greater demon like him must be rank S. At that moment, Victor closed the gate to the boss chamber, and Kelvin learned that the girl was a demon's king daughter. Melfina told Kelvin that the last demon king Gustav had no daughter, but Victor told him that he was keeping it a secret to protect her. Additionally, he said that only humans can release the seal. Victor planned to absorb Kelvin's powers and attacked his party. The reason for this was that he had a skill that allowed him to steal the characteristic of those he eat. Then Kelvin cast a gravity spell, but it didn't work on Victor. After that, Victor told Kelvin about his plan to absorb Sarah to become the next demon king. Kelvin was excited and smiled because he was a battle junkie. Victor was wondering why Kelvin was smiling, and he replied that he was excited to fight against a strong enemy. Suddenly, Victor used black magic to bring an army of skeletons to life. Then Victor ordered his skeleton army to attack Kelvin and his party members. Kelvin was aware that the skeletons were at the level of B-rank monsters, and he attacked them with a powerful spell. Gerard assisted his master and used a similar skill to destroy the skeletons. Suddenly the skeletons regenerated and they began to attack again. Victor realized that Kelvin is a battle junkie and he planned to wipe that smile off his face. He creates smoke and uses a special skill to sneak on Kelvin's party. Gerard managed to see through the attack, but Victor didn't stop with the sneak attacks. Then he fought against Gerard, and Victor managed to take his opponent by surprise. Next, Victor planned to beat up Kelvin, and he used Piccolo's snake arm technique from Dragon Ball. Kelvin called Clotho for backup, and Victor was surprised by his slime. Victor planned to free himself, and Kelvin enchanted Gerard's sword. Meanwhile, Victor thought he had won, but he fell for Kelvin's trap. Ephil attacked the enemy with a fire arrow. As a result, Victor could no longer move and Gerard cut off one of his arms. Victor was impressed because only one person had ever managed to inflict such damage on him. Despite everything, he had no intention of giving up and he enjoyed the fight with Kelvin. Then Victor used his trump card and he evolved to a huge monster. Kelvin and his comrades tried to defeat him, but their spells didn't work. Kelvin ordered Gerard to increase his power and he stopped the enemy. Gerard managed to push Victor back and tried to defeat him with a sword blow. Shortly afterwards, Gerard was stomped to the ground, but Ephil covered him. They attacked the enemy together and Kelvin ordered Clotho to attack. However, Clotho spat swords at Victor, which prevented the enemy from attacking. Kelvin took advantage of this moment and attacked Victor with a combined spell. Victor didn't manage to dodge the powerful laser spell, and he looked back. This spell caused the boss chamber to collapse, and Victor used his last strength to protect Sarah. Meanwhile, Kelvin realized that Victor had lied, because he had no intention of absorbing Sarah. Victor revealed to Kelvin that he was chosen by Gustav to protect his daughter. We then see that Victor taught Sarah martial arts so she could defend herself. After that, Sarah became sad because she only spent her life in the mansion. Demon King Gustav didn't let her leave the secret mansion because he tried to protect his beloved daughter. One day, the hero appeared and defeated the army of the Demon King Gustav. Gustav asked Victor to continue to look after his daughter, and he put a seal on her that only humans could break. The reason for this was that Gustav hoped that Sarah would be freed after the hero died. This is how Kelvin found out about Sarah's story, and Victor got one last request for Kelvin. He asked Kelvin to show Sarah the world and hide her identity as the daughter of the Demon King. Afterwards, Kelvin went to Sarah, and he freed her from the seal. Sarah woke up and she cried because she knew her loved ones had died. In the evening, Kelvin returned from the dungeon and Erd was glad that nothing happened to him. Kelvin showed him that they won against the archdemon. Then he lied to Erd and didn't reveal that Sarah was actually the Demon King's daughter. A few moments later, Gerard was summoned again, and he felt great because he had evolved. Kelvin looked at Gerard's stats and he was impressed because his stats increased tremendously. Then Kelvin noticed that Sarah had calmed down. She asked Kelvin if he was comfortable with the decision to make her his servant. He said that he will protect her and his concealment skill is at B rank. A few moments later they arrived in Parth, and Sarah was excited. She had a lot of fun, and Kelvin remembered when he first explored this world. Then he reported to Leo about the successful quest, and he was promoted to an A-rank adventurer. When he arrived at the inn, his promotion was celebrated, and he was flattered. Then the party started, and Kelvin had a lot of fun with his friends. Later, Kelvin woke up, and he noticed that Sarah wasn't at the inn. She spoke to Victor and said that she was having a lot of fun. At that moment, she remembered Victor's promise that he would one day teach her to swim. She remembered that she wanted to experience many new things and asked Victor to watch over her. A few weeks later, Kelvin's blacksmithing and Ephil's sewing skill was at rank S. As a result, Ephil used it to create new equipment for his comrades. Kelvin created a weapon from Victor's shield, and Sarah was very grateful for it. Afterwards, Gerard's received his new sword, and he liked the new design. Meanwhile, Kelvin got tired because he had worked for several days and he wanted to take a nap. Suddenly, Ephil asked what he wanted for dinner, and Kelvin replied that he really wanted to eat rice. The next morning, Kelvin and his comrades were on their way to another country. Sarah looked at the river and became very excited. Kelvin learned that she had never fished before, and he planned to teach her after they arrived in Toraj. Then we find out that the guildmaster told him that he can buy rice in Toraj. Meanwhile, Gerard wondered why Melfina had left the familiar network. The reason for this was that Kelvin couldn't summon Melfina, because she had to create an avatar first. A few moments later, Sarah saw a ship and asked Kelvin if they could travel on it. Also, she noticed that they were being secretly watched, and Kelvin was aware about it. Suddenly, a woman appeared and stopped the carriage to rob them. The woman said that they were members of the Black Wind. Kelvin learned that they are a band of thieves that became famous in Toraj while back. Kelvin looked at their levels and he learned that they were weak. He asked Sarah to take care of the thieves and didn't allow her to use her new weapons. The thieves underestimated Sarah and thought she was a weak little girl. Karna ordered her subordinates to eliminate the girl, but Karna realized that she screwed up. Suddenly, several thieves were knocked out despite Sarah holding back. Following this, a bald muscle hunk tried to crush Sarah with a hammer. He had no success, and Sarah easily pushed him away. The leader of this group was scared and thought she was going to die. Sarah didn't kill them, and the criminals were tied up. Suddenly the woman said that her boss will avenge her, and Kelvin became curious. Arriving in water country Toraj, Kelvin was surprised that it was like old Japan. Meanwhile, Sarah saw the sea for the first time, and she asked Kelvin to teach her to swim. If Kelvin didn't have his stuff in the carriage, he would have immediately gone to the beach with the girls. After that, he met Guildmaster Miss, and she was grateful that Kelvin had caught one of the leaders of the Black Wind. Then Guildmaster Miss told them that she was in the same guild with Leo 20 years ago. A few moments later, Kelvin learned that Trison's famous warrior Kristoff had defeated the Black Wind gang, but he became the new leader. Also, they learned that Guildmaster Miss can't do anything against Kristoff because of his title as a hero. Suddenly Kelvin came up with a good idea, and he asked Sarah if she could locate a group of 4 powerful adventurers. He planned to use the hero party to solve the problem with Kristoff. Then the heroes party learned that there is a bandit hideout nearby. Setsuna said that they don't have time and should travel to Parth, but Toya couldn't abandon people when they were in need. Then we see an hour earlier, and Kelvin was telling Miss about his plan. Back in the present, Kelvin and his party broke into the Black Wind's hideout. Then we see a child who was enslaved with her mother. One of the members made his move, and he was planning on doing something bad. He chose Ruka, and Ellie asked him to spare her daughter. Jack tried to drag Ruka away from her mother to play with her. That's when Kelvin and his party showed up in the room to free the slaves. Jack tried to attack them, but Kelvin knocked him out and saved the girl. Meanwhile, Kristoff told Prizra that Karna's unit was wiped out by an adventurer. She was shocked, but Ada was excited to be able to fight someone strong. A few moments later, Jack appeared in the room and they were shocked to see that he was unconscious. Then Kelvin and his party attacked the criminals, and Sarah didn't hold back. Kristoff underestimated Kelvin, but Kelvin said that they weren't enough to warm him up. Suddenly he said that he's looking forward to the main dish. Then we see the heroes party who entered the Black Wind hideout. Setsuna used her detection skill and could sense multiple enemies in a room. Meanwhile, Kelvin was excited because he wanted to play with the heroes. Shortly after, they discovered a door and they thought that enemies were waiting for them. Toya thought the slime was evil, but Ruka protected Clotho. Toya was confused, and Ruka's mother explained that Clotho was the pet of an adventurer who had rescued them. Suddenly, Ellie told the heroes that the adventurers were in trouble and fighting against the leaders of the Black Wind gang. When they arrived, they discovered a group of people knocked out on the ground, and Toya misunderstood something. Kelvin was already waiting for the heroes' party, and he pretended to be the boss of the Black Wind Gang. Kelvin insulted people he had defeated and claimed that the A-rank adventurers were pathetic. The heroes' party got angry and planned to stop the villains. Kelvin started laughing and said that to defeat him, they have to get stronger. Suddenly, he challenged them to a fight. Kelvin wanted to fight against the 4 heroes, and the loser would have to grant the winner a wish. Toya wanted to face Kelvin in a one-on-one, but his friends noticed that their opponent is very strong. A few moments later, the heroes prepared for the fight, and Ephil knew that Kelvin's wish was to ask the heroes to arrest Kristoff. Kelvin also planned to test the heroes' powers. Afterwards, Ephil brought breakfast, and Kelvin asked his friends to just watch. Ephil was worried because the heroes might have unique skills, but Kelvin replied that he had equipped his Skill Eater glove for that purpose. Meanwhile, Toya's group didn't intend to lose, and they activated their Fairy Grace skills. Toya ran towards Kelvin to attack him, but Kelvin cast a spell. They learned that Kelvin was a powerful caster, and were overwhelmed by his attack. Suddenly Nana ordered her fire dragon to attack the enemy with his fire breath. Kelvin dodged and appeared behind Miyabi. He used his Skill Eater glove and copied a unique skill from Miyabi. Sarah explained to Gerard that Kelvin had 2 gloves and that he had copied a unique skill before the fight started. Toya then attacked Kelvin, but he managed to dodge the attack with ease. Miyabi was healed and she felt weird. Suddenly Toya attacked with his full strength, and he managed to knock Kelvin's short sword out of his hand. Kelvin was impressed, and he attacked Toya with his fists. The reason for this was that he had stolen Sarah's unique skill with his other glove. The heroes were shocked about Kelvin's overwhelming power. Suddenly Setsuna attacked, but Kelvin dodged and cast an earth spell. He created a huge wall of earth, and Setsuna planned to cut it apart. Kelvin's comrades were surprised that she managed to destroy Kelvin's earth wall with a single attack. Then Kelvin attempted to attack Setsuna and cast a powerful fireball. Toya tried to protect her, and the two were hit by his attack. Then Toya planned to fight Kelvin alone because he didn't want to put his friends in danger. Setsuna slapped him because he always tries to save the world on his own. She said that they were summoned to this world together and were chosen by the goddess to defeat the Demon King. Setsuna asked Toya why he doesn't rely on his comrades in battle. Also, they said that he doesn't have to bear the burden of defeating the Demon King alone. In this moment, Toya realized that he had to rely more on his comrades to defeat Kelvin. Suddenly Kelvin was blinded by a fairy, and he was impressed. Nana cast an ice spell to freeze his leg. Since Kelvin couldn't move, he created a huge explosion to push his opponents back. The heroes' party were shocked by the explosion, and Kelvin healed himself with an instant heal spell. Then Kelvin gave some advice to the girls who were debuffing him. They thought he was making fun of him and got angry. Suddenly, Toya wanted to show him his true power, and Kelvin was excited. Toya planned to attack Kelvin, and his friends wanted to support him. Nana went all out and she cast her strongest ice spell. Then Kelvin realized that he can't move, and this spell is getting annoying. Miyabi summoned a giant monster and a grave death ogre appeared. Meanwhile, Sarah teased Kelvin and asked if he needed help. Kelvin had a lot of fun, and he summoned his adamantine guardian to repel Miyabi's attack. Meanwhile, the heroes were confused, and Kelvin asked his guardians to protect him for 30 seconds. Following this, he created many magic circles and activated Miyabi's unique spell. Setsuna wanted to stop him and defeated the golems with a strong sword blow. They didn't manage to stop Kelvin, and he destroyed Nana's ice spell. After this, Setsuna made her move, and she used her Heaven's Walk to increase her speed. Kelvin said he identifies as a woman and knocked her out with a powerful punch. He was then attacked by Miyabi's powerful Grave Death Ogre, but he dodged. Kelvin started a counterattack, and he managed to defeat Miyabi with ease. After Miyabi was defeated, Nana tried to defeat the enemy and she planned to crush him. Kelvin cast a spell that stopped her attack, and he knocked her out with his Hyper Impact skill. Then Toya wanted to go all out, and he couldn't forgive Kelvin for hurting his friends. Kelvin defeated Toya with an uppercut, and he won the fight with his favorite Mike Tyson move. A few hours later, Toya woke up and he was confused. He thought that Kelvin was assaulting a little girl and discovered the slime. At that moment, he realized that Kelvin was the adventurer who had saved the kidnapped people. Toya also remembered Kelvin giving him advice during battle. As a result, he apologized to Kelvin for thinking he was a villain. Kelvin forgave him, and Toya wanted to become his disciple. The next day, Ellie and Ruka said goodbye to Kelvin. Guildmaster Mist told Kelvin that the kidnapped people would be sent back to their hometown, and the Black Wind bandits were arrested. Then, Kelvin was asked what he planned to do next, and he started to smile. A few days later we see Toya, who was thrown into the air by a strong monster. The heroes' party fought against a giant octopus to improve their skills. Meanwhile, Kelvin watched them and Efiel prepared a picnic. The two melee fighters then planned to attack and Kelvin ordered the magicians to watch their comrades. Meanwhile, Miyabi was jealous of Nana because she was blessed with an erotic body. Kelvin was bored and Sarah wanted to know why he was training them. He replied that there was no particular reason and he was just in the mood to help them. Meanwhile, lunch was prepared and Efiel had cooked a feast. Shortly after, Miyabi noticed that Efiel was also blessed with an erotic body, and she knew she had lost. Following this, Kelvin learned that Priestess Colette had summoned them to this world. Kelvin then asked what his team would do if they encountered an S-rank monster. Suddenly, Sarah said that she had caught something big, and an S-rank dungeon boss monster appeared behind her. Toya knew that he wasn't strong enough to defeat an S-rank monster yet. He replied that he would run away and develop a strategy together with his team. Kelvin knew he had changed, and was proud of him. The following morning Kelvin said goodbye to the heroes' party. Toya thanked Kelvin and he had a gift for him. Toya was happy about the good luck charm and promised his teacher to become stronger. Afterwards the heroes' party left and they were looking forward to defeat the demon lord. Shortly afterwards, Kelvin asked Gerard what his chances would be if they fought against the Liza Empire. Gerard replied that he was confident that together they could defeat the kingdom. Suddenly Efiel complimented him because he always helps other people in need and never abandons his friends. Then Sarah showed up and she said that Guildmaster Miss was sending him a message. He started acting strange and was excited to eat rice. Later Kelvin and his comrades stood in front of a huge castle. Gerard told him about the rumor that the first ruler of this country came from another world. Then they entered the Japanese castle and Kelvin was surprised to see a Japanese tatami floor. Kelvin was excited, and he was greeted by the ruler of the Toraj kingdom Tsubaki. Kelvin was surprised by her name because she had a typical Japanese name. Meanwhile, the bodyguards noticed that Sarah wasn't an ordinary adventurer. Then Tsubaki wanted to give them a reward for arresting the Black Wind Gang. Kelvin wanted to eat rice, and Tsubaki explained to him that he could also wish for fame or fortune. Kelvin replied that he just wants to enjoy delicious food, and Tsubaki started to like him. Suddenly she asked her servant to prepare a banquet for her guests. A few moments later the food was served and Kelvin was shocked. He was happy to see rice in this world, and started to dig tons of rice in his mouth. The girls enjoyed the delicious Japanese cuisine. They had a lot of fun and celebrated with their new friends. A few days later we see Kelvin in the royal palace because Tsubaki invited him to stay in Toraj. Efiel learned to cook Japanese cuisine, and Kelvin was impressed with her cooking skills. Suddenly Tsubaki appeared, who regularly joined him at lunch. She said she liked Efiel's food, and she also had a crush on Kelvin. Following this, she offered the Riz Master to be her personal caretaker. Kelvin almost accepted her offer, but he decided to politely decline. After lunch, they learned about a teleport gate that takes them to Parth. Suddenly Kelvin learned that Leo had given them permission to use the teleport gate. Then they entered the teleport gate and thanked Tsubaki for her hospitality. In the next day, he learned that Claire heard that Tsubaki got a crush on him. He said that he is not moving to Toraj because he is enjoying his life in Parth. Afterwards, he planned to go out, and Claire teased him. A few hours later, he showed his friends the new house he had bought. Kelvin told them that they could choose their room, and Clotho wanted a room too. He learned that Clotho wanted to live in the yard, and he didn't mind. Later, his new servants arrived, and Ruka was looking forward to it. Ellie said they are grateful to work for him, and will do their best. In the evening, Kelvin almost fell asleep in his new bed. Suddenly, he sensed that Melfina, who had created her avatar, has returned. He was excited and immediately summoned his goddess Melfina into the room. Kelvin blushed and Melfina was happy that she was Kelvin's type. The next morning we see Melfina, and she was amazed by Efiel's cooking skills. After that she introduced herself, and Gerard was surprised that she was Melfina. Melfina thought that Sarah had a grudge against her, but Sarah planned to get along with her. Meanwhile, Gerard teased Kelvin, and he tried to clear up the misunderstanding. Later on, Melfina was served cookies and she loved the cookies baked by Efiel. Then Melfina wanted to give Kelvin a reward for successfully summoning her. She cast a spell on him and he received the grace of Melfina. Melfina explained to him that this blessing would completely prevent damage that would result in death. Also, he learned about a second ability that allowed him to summon a hero. In the afternoon, Sarah fought against Melfina, and she tried to hit her with a super strong punch. But Melfina dodged her attack, and she countered with an ice spell. Meanwhile, Kelvin was deep in thought and wondered if Toya's party had arrived on the West Continent. Then we see Melfina activated her divine dress, and she attacked with her spear. After Sarah managed to destroy Melfina's spear, they pushed themselves to their limit. Meanwhile, Gerard learned that they were fighting for the right to sleep next to Kelvin. Then the fight ended in a draw, and the two girls enjoyed a hot bath, and Melfina wondered what Kelvin was doing. Ephel suspected that he was thinking about his second blessing ability. In the evening, Melfina surprised her lover and fed him a piece of chocolate. Then Kelvin asked her why this world needed heroes. She explained to him that the appearance of the Demon King is a regular cycle, and it causes the new Demon King to receive a skill that multiplies the evil within him. In addition, he receives a skill that nullifies damage, but this ability can be neutralized by a hero. Then Kelvin said that he doesn't want to force a person from another world to become a hero. Suddenly Melfina told him about the reincarnation summon. Kelvin learned that Toya and his friends were transported into this world, but there is still the option to summon a soul of a dead person. He learned that he had experienced such a reincarnation and was relieved. Afterwards, he talked about it with his friends and decided to summon a hero. In the evening, Melfina was surprised that he had already made his decision. Kelvin replied that he had thought it through carefully and was ready to summon a hero. Then he started summoning, and he sent his familiars back to the summoning network. Ephel gave him a recovery potion so he could fully restore his MP. Following this, Kelvin created a magic circle that consumed enormous amounts of magical power. The spell began to search for a suitable soul for reincarnation, and Kelvin waited while enjoying some tea. A few moments later, a suitable soul was found and the magic circle started to glow. As a result, an adorable girl appeared and Kelvin introduced himself to her. Rin was excited and told him about an angel who explained the circumstances to her. Melfina told Kelvin that the angel was a servant of hers that she left in charge. Suddenly Rin started crying and Kelvin was confused. She was grateful and fell asleep in Kelvin's arms out of exhaustion. Suddenly Kelvin also fell asleep because he was out of magical power. During the night, Rin woke up from a nightmare and she was happy to have received a second life. We then learned that in her previous life she suffered from an incurable illness and died. After that she went out to the yard and was excited to be able to run for the first time. She looked at the stars and Kelvin showed up to talk a little bit with her. He said that he had also been reincarnated, but had no memories of his old life. He told Rin that he was nervous at first, but he was very happy because of the friends he met. Afterwards, Kelvin learned that Rin could never leave the hospital room and that she was very sad. She was grateful that Kelvin had summoned her, and that this gave her a healthy body. Kelvin was glad that Rin liked her new life and he planned to tell everyone that she was his little sister. After this, he welcomed her and promised to show her many beautiful things in this fantasy world. The next morning Kelvin woke up and he was surprised to find Sarah in his bed. Then he realized that Melfina was also sleeping with him, who had a strange dream about a legendary sushi. Afterwards he found Rin in his bed too, and he was glad that Rin had gotten used to her new life. Next, Kelvin went to the entry of a dungeon and asked his servants to accompany him. The reason for this was that he wanted to increase their levels so that they could defend themselves in an emergency. Ruka was nervous, and Kelvin explained to them that he got a skill to share his experience. Meanwhile, Sarah and Gerard were hunting monsters to increase the level of Ellie and the two girls. Kelvin's plan worked, and Ruka was surprised by the level up sound. Following this, they looked at their status and were impressed. Suddenly, Ephel reported that a shadow wolf was running in their direction. After that, Kelvin asked his little sister if she liked dogs. A few moments later, the shadow wolf appeared to attack Kelvin's party. Kelvin said that they don't have to be afraid and asked Melfina to protect Ellie and Ruka. The shadow wolf attacked Kelvin, but he activated a gravity spell. Kelvin weakened the wolf until the monster only had half its HP. He then successfully tamed the monster, and Melfina congratulated him. In the afternoon, Ephel told Kelvin that Erd and his comrades were on his way to them. Erd was surprised to see Kelvin in the forest and greeted him. Meanwhile, Erd's comrades were jealous because Kelvin was surrounded by pretty girls. Kelvin introduced them to his new members, and Erd's comrades were jealous at him. They got an emotional damage and planned to hunt some monsters. A few moments later, Sarah and Gerard returned, and Ephel used her far-seeing skill. She told Kelvin that she couldn't find any monsters in the dungeon. Back in town, Kelvin apologized to Erd because his party killed all the monsters in the forest. Erd wasn't angry. Instead, he was impressed and advised him to take the S-rank exam. The following day, Kelvin washed the dog and he thought about Erd's advice. He then learned that Rin named her new pet Alex and he liked the name. Then Clotho helped his master wash up Alex and Rin had a lot of fun. After Alex was clean, Kelvin welcomed him and told him to take care of Rin. In the days that followed, Rin learned many new things and enjoyed every day to the fullest. She became stronger and her bond with Alex grew into a great friendship. 3 weeks passed, and Sarah noticed that some people had surrounded the mansion. Kelvin told Sarah that he put Ephil and Melfina to bed. Meanwhile, Gerard stood guard outside Ellie and Ruka's room. Afterwards, Kelvin looked at the enemies and learned that they are no match for him. For this reason, he decided to let Rin and Alex handle the problem. Rin planned to do her best, and Kelvin gave her a little clotho. As a result, she was able to use Ephil's far-seeing skill, which he had copied with his gloves. He also gave Rin a mithril sword that he had forged. In the meantime, some assassins of Trisen planned to kill Kelvin because they viewed him as a threat. Then we see Rin, and she wanted to do her best to help Kelvin. Shortly afterwards, she encountered her first enemies, and she showed no mercy. 10 minutes later, all assassins were defeated, and she celebrated her first successful mission. Kelvin noticed that there was another one hiding, and he appeared behind the enemy. The assassin leader was afraid to see Kelvin, and realized he had screwed up. Then we see the Emperor of Trisen, who started the meeting of the Round Table. King Zell was worried that Kristoff's arrest would expose their criminal business. He also told them that some kingdoms were already forming an alliance. General Tristan told him to calm down, and that they would easily win the war. He said that they can use this opportunity to conquer the entire continent. Princess Shutora agreed that it was a good opportunity, but now is not the time. Suddenly her brother Asgard said that he also favored a war. He planned to test his new secret weapon that he have gained. Then they decided to declare war against the 3 nations, and Zell entrusted the future of Trisen to his 5 generals. A few moments later, we see Jin making his way to General Cleave's room. He knocked on the door, and General Cleave invited him in. Once in the room, General Cleave was asked to gather at the round table. Suddenly, General Cleave stood up and asked Jin if he was pretty. A few months later, Kelvin's party traveled to an elf village in the Crest Forest. Ephil felt strange, and Kelvin told her that it might be her elf blood that caused this feeling. Then we see a few days before, and Leo found out that the assassins were sent from the Trisen kingdom. Leo said that the kingdom of Trisen has been acting very suspicious lately. Afterwards, he learned that he had received a message from the Beast King Leonhard. As a result, Kelvin was sent to Gon for the S-rank promotion exam. Following this, we learned that he needed the approval of 2 rulers to become a S-rank adventurer. Melfina told them that King Leonhard is a very strong warrior, and Kelvin was excited. Rin was wondering why Leonhard didn't do the job himself, and Kelvin suspected that Trisen was somehow involved. A few moments later, they were attacked by elves. Kelvin cleared up the misunderstanding and showed them a letter that King Leonhard had sent him. Then Nelras, the elder of the village, greeted them and apologized for their ignorance. Suddenly he looked at Ephil, and he called her Rumiel. A few moments later, the misunderstanding was cleared up, and Kelvin wanted to know about Rumiel, suspecting that it would lead to clues to Ephil's birthplace. Nezra said that 20 years ago, they lived deep in a forest on the western continent. Suddenly, a dragon appeared, who told them to offer an elf. They refused, and the dragon began attacking the elf village. Rumiel planned to sacrifice herself, and the dragon made a deal with her. She became the dragon's bride, and in return he spared the elf village. Then Gerard asked why they left the western continent. Nezra told them that a few years later they found Rumiel's corpse in the forest, and they feared that this would cause the Fire Dragon King to return. Following this, they thought that Ephil was the child of Lumiel and the Dragon King. But Melfina explained that half-elves are always born of a human and an elf. Afterwards, Nezra apologized to Ephil for not being able to save her mother. Ephil wasn't sad and said that she still lives a happy life. Then they started to talk about the main subject. Kelvin asked about a new type of monsters that King Leonhard mentioned. Nezra said that these monsters kidnap elves, and they are not strong enough to defeat them. Kelvin's friends promised that they would do their best to help them. Suddenly, Kelvin got an idea and asked Nezra if he could get permission to renovate the village a little. In the night, an army of monsters with soldiers entered the forest. The leader of the mixed demon-beast army was planning to kidnap many elves again. Suddenly, one of the soldiers was killed, and they were confused. The attacks didn't stop, and the leader ordered them to hide behind the monsters. Then we see Ephil, who used her new powerful bow, and she played American Sniper. After that, we learned that Kelvin set up a lot of traps, and Gerard was excited for the fight. Kelvin planned to crush his enemies and told his friends to attack. A few moments later, a soldier reported to the vice commander that the mixed demon-beast army had been wiped out in the forest. The vice commander learned that a single adventurer defeated the monsters. He was shocked by this report and planned to use their secret weapon. Suddenly Rin and Melfina appeared and the enemies were scared. The vice commander used a magic item and summoned a huge golem. Suddenly Melfina got a great idea and she told Rin to take care of the monster. However, Melfina asked if she had the confidence to fight the golem. She replied that she will do her best and went into battle. Then Giant Lord tried to crush Rin, but she managed to dodge his attack. Rin jumped at the monster and aimed her sword at its head. Unfortunately, her sword broke and Giant Lord grazed her with an attack. Rin was aware that if he had hit her seriously, she would have died. But she didn't give up and rushed towards her opponent. Kotho gave her new weapons, and she planned to use her dual-wielding skill. After that, she launched a powerful combination attack with Alex. They managed to take down the monster and the enemy was shocked. Suddenly the vice commander ordered his golem to activate his true form and Giant Lord became a fire golem. Ephil was worried about Rin, but Kelvin was sure that his little sister would be fine. Following this, Rin dodged the dangerous attacks and launched another combination attack with Alex. At that moment, she defeated the golem again and the enemy's vice commander was shocked. Then we see Kelvin, and he was attacked by an enemy. Kelvin managed to create a barrier in time and his enemy greeted him. General Cleve was surprised to see an elf girl, and he thought she was cute. He activated a spell to make Ephil his slave, but Kelvin prevented it. Suddenly Kelvin warned him not try to lay a hand on his woman. Cleve wasn't scared, and he looked down on his opponent. Afterwards, Kelvin looked at Cleve's status and learned that he was reincarnated. Kelvin understood that his opponent was strong and ordered Ephil to hide in the forest. Then Kelvin began to launch an attack against the enemies and cast a wind spell. He then created several swords and shot them at his opponent. Cleve managed to block Kelvin's attack and was surprised by his strength. A few moments later, Kelvin attacked again, but his opponent blocked it with a powerful barrier spell. Kelvin also used magic bullets, but Cleve's barrier withstood his attacks. Suddenly Cleve repelled his attacks, and he wondered why Kelvin was smiling. Shortly afterwards, Cleve's servants appeared and they tried to kill Kelvin. At that moment, Kelvin realized that Cleve's comrades were hypnotized, and Cleve didn't notice that Ephil was preparing an attack. Suddenly, Cleve was attacked, and his barrier was destroyed. A few moments later, Kelvin had created golems for the battle. Cleve learned that Kelvin could use black magic and was impressed. However, Cleve took out his magical girl wand and they flew into the sky. Then Cleve launched his attack, but Kelvin easily dodged it. Suddenly Kelvin countered with magic missiles, and Cleve increased his speed. Kelvin kept up, and his enemy was impressed because Kelvin could not only dodge his attacks, but also use powerful magic. Suddenly, Kelvin talked down to Cleve and his enemy planned to go all out. Cleve didn't hesitate to hit his own comrades, and Kelvin was shocked about this. For this reason, he flew higher so that Cleve wouldn't hit his own comrades with the magic missiles. Afterwards, Cleve explained to Kelvin that in this world, only power counts, and the strong can do anything they want. Kelvin did not share his opinion because he believes that with great power comes great responsibility. Then the two used powerful spells and their spells collided with each other. Cleve was bleeding and he was shocked because his beautiful face was wounded. He was angry and threatened to wipe out Kelvin with his next attack. Following this, he cast his strongest spell, but Kelvin wasn't scared. Cleve said he thought his S-rank magic couldn't be stopped by anyone, and it caused a big problem. As a result, Kelvin told Clotho that it was time to use his real weapon in this fight. Kelvin then began preparing a spell that would stop Cleve's S-rank magic. All his comrades believed in him and were sure that Kelvin would manage to defeat the enemy. A few moments later, his spell was ready, and he had gathered enough magical power. Kelvin activated his spell and attacked his opponent with his Boreas Death Scythe spell. After his attack ended, Kelvin realized he missed. Cleve's legs were severed and Kelvin planned to mercilessly exterminate him. At the last moment, another enemy appeared and saved Cleve. Tristan introduced himself and told that he is the general of the Mixed Demon Beast Army. Kelvin was surprised that Tristan could use summoning magic. Then he said goodbye and fled with Cleve back to Trisen. Shortly after, his friends asked if he was okay. Melfina asked what happened to the enemy, and he apologized for letting him escape. Later, Nezra planned to prepare a banquet to celebrate their victory. Gerard teased Ephil, and he said that he had listened to the whole conversation. Afterwards, we see Kelvin's other girls who were having a race. Rin activated a spell and managed to reach Kelvin first. Then they congratulated Rin, and she wanted to be praised by Kelvin. Meanwhile, Cleve woke up and realized he was being tied up. Tristan said that he had healed his legs and tortured him. He used him as a test subject and tested weapons on him. Then we see the elf village, and they celebrated the victory against the Tricen army. Meanwhile, Kelvin was enjoying the night alone and Efiel looked after him. He said he was grateful for his life in this world and planned to continue using his powers to protect his beloved comrades. Then Efiel showed Kelvin a hair ornament that had belonged to her mother. Kelvin asked if she wanted to try it on. He attached the hair accessory to her and complimented her. A few moments later, his friends showed up and they missed him at the party. Suddenly, a little girl appeared and she thanked Kelvin for saving the village. She started laughing and revealed her true identity. Kelvin learned that Beast King Leonhardt was standing in front of him and that he had passed his S-rank exam. He also learned that an official ceremony will be held in 4 days, where he can fight against other rank S adventurers. Kelvin was happy, and he looked forward to fight the other S-rank adventurers.